All right. Well, Jim, do you have anything that you have gone through in your files, any papers? It's become a popular segment on the shows.
You know I do, brother. No, I told you I did this, had this, found this, asked you if you had ever heard this specifically. As you know, I've been in the process trying to not clean stuff out, but just sort some things and looking for stuff. And the folks have, like the agent reports and or the talent evaluations or the various memos or stuff from my files over here. And I asked you if I had ever read you this, and you said no. This was the deal that Bill Watts and I made for WCW Super Brawl in 1993. So that was Super Brawl 3 for the Rock and Roll Express and the Heavenly Bodies, as you'll recall, to do the Smoky Mountain Wrestling crossover on TV leading up to the promotion of that pay-per-view, right? If the younger listeners want to Google it or whatever, WCW Super Brawl 3, and you'll see details on what happened, I guess.
February 93.
Yes. But the reason why that I have it hits confidential memorandum on the WCW letterhead, the reason why I have this, the deal had already been in place for probably at that point well over a month. But that's when I've told the story before in, a couple of shoot interviews, as the kids say. Watts called me in Tennessee, because I was operating Smoky Mountain Wrestling, obviously, and said, well, they're fucking me around. I'm not going to be here by Super Brawl, so I'm going to put your deal in writing so they can't fuck you. Like, okay, God damn it, what the fuck?
Yeah, what are you thinking when you actually hear those words?
I was thinking, here we go again. Because I had agreed to finally work with WCW again when Watts and I started talking, it was late 1992. So after 2 years, Herd is gone. Watts comes in as not just the booker, because I, talked to Dusty in 91 when he was the booker. I said, I can't be here around Herd. You're not running the show. But then Herd's gone, and Watts actually is the vice president of wrestling operations, or whatever the fuck their title was then, where he reports only to TBS. But the problem was he reported to TBS. And so this has just been, we haven't even executed the first pay-per-view match yet, but this was going to be the start of, again, as I've talked about before, kind of an early developmental thing without really developing from scratch. But when they had young guys that needed more experience, that we could take them and work them 15 days a month, and that we would have access to major names, which we already had. Bobby Eaton. He had given us Bobby for 12 weeks to freshen him up. And we got a couple dates on Arn to go along with it. This, the whole deal hadn't even really got kicked off yet. And we've barely done the first TVs. And already he's like, I ain't going to be here. I'm like, fuck. The fuck is the matter with these people? So, and there wasn't anybody else that I was going to be negotiating with, doing business with, trusting, or whatever, that had any kind of the concept of what we were planning to do, if they had any interest or not. And so I was like, okay, well, we're in and we're out.
Obviously, you wouldn't know how things were going to play out, but had you ever in any way met Eric Bischoff before this point in time?
No. I mean, besides working for Vern and then, coming to work there and seeing him on their television until I don't remember us having any interaction at the TVs up until the pay-per-view, where I accused him of being one of the people that, because again, somebody told me that he was in the studio hanging around when the topic was, or concern was raised. So
And by that point, he was in charge, right?
No,
No?
he wasn't in charge, but he was lobbying for charge. But he wasn't specifically. But the problem was at that point, nobody was in charge.
Right. And, I'll let you go back to this without interruption in a second, but this
Yeah.
all led to also Jim Ross being ousted. And he was doing more than
Yes.
just commentary. And, within a few months, he was at WrestleMania.
And JR was, in the fallout as being one of Watts's guys, but it also didn't hurt that JR had said, yeah, bring it Eric Kidd in, he's a good kid or whatever. And then the guy's there. But no, that's what I'm saying is nobody was in charge at that point. Everybody was jockeying. And I'll tell Tony Schiavone was another person who was buried to me along with Eric Bischoff as being somebody who was like, no, we got to edit that shit out of the TV, out of the audio, and etc. When we did the television angle with Watts,
He was happy. He was happy when Jim Ross left.
Well, yeah, and they were all trying to either get a job, get a better job, keep the job they had, or get the people out of the way they didn't like. So, nevertheless, I actually found it's not even a contract here, it's just a memo because Watts and I had made the deal and it was a verbal deal and a handshake. That's all I needed as long as he was around. But as he knew, they'd try to fuck us out of our money as soon as he was gone.
Can I ask a question before you? I'm sorry to interrupt again. Before Bill Watts came back to WCW in early '92, had you kept in touch with him at all after the closure of the UWF or after the sale of the UWF in 1987? Had you talked to him at all? And was he, when he started talking to you, was he at all aware of your feelings about WCW and Turner Management?
No. Well, I would have from the time, what was it, 87 or 88 by the time that
87.
They got to 87 by the time they got the whole thing wrapped up, probably for 4.5 years. No, he was out of the business, really didn't, I didn't particularly want to call him up and say, hey, Bill, you want to talk about the wrestling business that, you didn't get your money on or whatever. And I was busy. But then when he showed back up when they hired him in WCW, I was like, okay, at least maybe he can do something with this thing. And he had actually, as I've said before, reached out to me because he wanted to see how Paul Orndorff was doing. Because, he had used Orndorff early on in Mid-South before Paul ever went to the WWF and was a huge Orndorff fan, but Paul had the nerve damage in his arm. And since he'd been working for me, Bill wanted to see, how he thought that, or how I thought that Paul was doing. Could he do that again on national TV, et cetera, et cetera? And I said, yes, he still looks fucking phenomenal. And he's doing a great job, right? And that's the thing. He was also saying, by the way, I'm going to be booking Paul away from you, basically, as the presentation. It was the old, hey, Vince Sr. calls up and says, I want Waldo Von Erich, but I'll give you a week on Andre. So that we started talking about, well, what could we do here? And just because he could tell me, and I would understand when he's telling me some of the problems that were surmounting down there with how they'd structured the thing already that he was trying to fucking solve so they wouldn't lose their ass. It wasn't that he wanted the boys to fucking starve and work for $60 a night, but they hired him to not lose at that point 10 million, I think it was, or was it 12? Somewhere between the $8 and $12 million a year window. This is before they'd ever made any money. So anyway, we started talking. And of course, I said, I'll finish Orndorff up and etc. But that's where the genesis of the idea for the Super Brawl crossover came from, because I can't remember whether it was on the phone or when I went down there and spoke to him. It was when I went down there and spoke to him in person. I said, you remember when they were doing, Brian, the mini movies to promote the pay-per-views where they'd put the guys, if it was Bash in the Beach, wasn't that when they had a midget with a bomb to blow up the boat or something?
By the time you're talking about, they would have done either one or two, because the first one was for Halloween Havoc Spin the Wheel, Make the Deal with Jake Roberts and Cheatham the Midget, Medusa and Sting. And then they did the White Castle of Fear for Super Brawl, the card you're talking about. And then the Beach Blast one was later that summer.
They had done the first mini movie. And everybody just remembers the midget blowing up the boat, but they did several of these things. And I said to, because it was going around the internet internet newsletter and or locker room rumor both had it that they spent like $60,000 on this thing, right? To shoot this and have the guys and the crew and edit it and all it just preposterous. And I told him, I said, because that was Turner Home Entertainment trying to make their contribution. But the problem is that they, as he acknowledged, they, at that point, when he came in, they didn't have angles going that anybody cared about. They'd had upheavals in talent. The boys were not exactly fond of management because of Herd for all that time. And they had no fucking, just no difference direction to go in than being the kind of discount WWF. And it was so busy that people didn't believe in it, the WCW fans they had at that time. I said, Bill, for half of what you see, I always started with that, for half of what you foolishly wasted 5 times as much money on something as it's worth. For half of what you spent on the mini movie, I will provide the talent, the angle, the footage to back it up from our side, and the execution of an attraction for your pay-per-view that even if it doesn't goddamn set the world on fire, it will sell you more pay-per-views than the goddamn mini movie did. And he said, okay, what is it? And I pitched the thing to him. But I said, we've got, for the past 7 years on TBS, the most popular tag team in that period of time has been the Rock and Roll Express. These are undisputed facts. Correct? Correct. It houses and ratings. They were part of the biggest rating that the Turner Broadcasting had gotten for one of their regularly weekly television programs since they'd owned the fucking company for almost 4 years, the Rock and Roll Express. I said, I got the most popular team in the network's history. Now I've got the Heavenly Bodies, Stan Lane and Tom Pritchard. You've got Bobby Eaton. You're loaning him to me, but together we've got the Midnight Express and the Heavenly Bodies with Jim Cornette, who opposed them for so fucking long and drew the record gates at the blah, blah, blah. We've got another promotion with a television program and the ability to make it look like an outsider deal. And I will come up with the angle and the way that we execute it and blah, blah, blah. And we'll come and put them over on the pay-per-view, which is emanating from Asheville, North Carolina, the heart of Mid-Atlantic wrestling, where the Rock and Roll Express were fucking gods. And I'm not talking about 30 years ago. I'm talking about 3.5 years ago. And he said, okay, so we got $25,000 for Smoky Mountain Wrestling for basically me to administrate this whole goddamn thing. And each of the guys got an extra $1,000 for making the pay-per-view match, which was about 2 weeks worth of what they were making in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And this was 30 years ago. So we're talking about around $3,000 a piece or whatever for today, plus $250 a piece for getting booked twice, I believe, on TBS and once on the national syndicated show that they did. And we executed the thing as we were supposed to, even though Watts wasn't there. But then that was the end of that. And I had this on paper. So because Ole had called me, because they put Ole in charge of the booking while they found a new vice president, which I think was, who the fuck succeeded Watts as vice president? Was
I'm
was
forgetting
it
the name now? I know who it is too.
Jesus Christ. Well, nevertheless, Bill Shaw, Bob Dew,
one of those,
either two. One of those. Did they ever? There was a bridge guy. Well, nevertheless, Ole had called me and said, "Well, I guess you got this deal on paper, huh?" yes, I do, Ole. We were awaiting the check. But anyway, this is what he wrote, and then I'll open the floor to questions. It's confidential memorandum, January 26, 1993, to Brian Mitchells. He was the comptroller, the guy that paid people and kept track of these things. From Bill Watts, Smoky Mountain Wrestling compensation for WCW, Saturday TV, and Super Brawl 3. Number one, will pay each person involved in WCW Saturday on January 25th and February 9th $250 each. 2, we will pay $5,000 for their bout on Super Brawl 3. 3, we will pay as Smoky Mountain Wrestling $25,000 for Super Brawl 3. WCW will receive the necessary tapes and footage, plus the spontaneity of SMW's involvement on our TV and this pay-per-view. It creates an outside element that has fan appeal by former big stars with WCW. It should add greatly to the overall appeal of Super Brawl 3, and Bob Dew approved this business deal. We will remit these payments in the normal course as we pay for participation on each of these events, meaning when the talent money goes out, their regular talent. And he itemized that on January 25th, following talent from SMW appeared for WCW at center stage per number one above: Ricky Morton, Robert Gibson, Bobby Eaton, Stan Lane, Tommy Pritchard. He still knew Tom from when he was Tommy. Tommy Pritchard and Jim Cornette. And he carbon copied Bill Shaw, Bob Dew, and Dusty Rhodes. So, because that's the first fucking thing that Ole had called up when they realized it was on paper. And says, "So you got it on paper, huh, kid?"
And Ole was done with them by the end of the year, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. He was out by the end of the year. What year was that? That was 1990. Yeah, he was. A lot of people didn't stay around long, but that was, again, it was an early attempt at a sort of a participation with, in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, we didn't want to be a national promotion. That was not the design of the thing. But it was a great regional territory and a place for people to learn. And if you had a relationship with somebody that understood the wrestling business that you could trust, they also understood that it was valuable for them in a way, because they are not only going to be able to send people maybe that they don't have room for, but they'd like a future for, but they're going to be able to have the first shot at getting somebody that, I might find, pick up, develop, uncover, whatever, which turned out to be dozens and dozens of fucking people. But they were had their heads too far up their ass with who was going to run the thing. And as a result, nobody was ever running it.
It was pretty cool as a kid to watch WCW Saturday night and see Smoky Mountain footage. It was right around the time that I saw the first couple articles in the Apter mags that had pictures. And, you and Stan, Midnight Express, had been such a big part of that show. And then you were just gone. And for like a year and a half, 2 years, it was, whatever. Again, I was a kid. I was just a kid watching wrestling. Oh, there he is in a magazine. Oh, there he is on Global. At 4:00 in the afternoon one day. I'm like, oh my God, they're still doing something. So when I saw Smoky Mountain, especially the clips, it looked so cool. It got me hooked on, I need to get as much footage of this as I can.
Well, and here's the thing with with WCW at the time, and I've told a story, I think 93 or 4, whatever it was, on a couple of occasions, we drew more people in the Knoxville Civic Coliseum than they drew in the fucking Omni in Atlanta. And what we were trying to do was establish that we have the ability to give people a leg up in a wrestling business and maybe have a little big brother over here that we can work with, get some notoriety off of, but not to look like a goddamn flunky or whatever. But the idea of a cross promotion thing, the one thing that people were starting to realize, especially when the WCW was down to the base audience that it was that the promotions hated each other. And that's why we came up with the idea for us to storm out in a shoot. And for the younger listeners, I will explain briefly. They showed footage on WCW Saturday night of the Rock and Roll Express, who have been signed their first time back in, almost 3 years or however long it's been. They're going to be in a feature match on Super Brawl. And here's some footage of what they're doing now. And it was like 2 minutes of them beating the shit out of me and the Heavenly Bodies. And so
with Bob Caudle too. That was another thing. I hadn't heard his voice in a few years.
With Bob Caudle, who had been all over the shows that people have been watching just a few years before. And so they're like, okay, yeah, I remember this shit. Big crowds, whatever the fuck. And then the following week, when they're having a match involving, I don't know, Tits McGee and his friend Joe, whatever it was, me and Stan Lane and Tom Pritchard and Bobby Eaton had been hiding in a goddamn janitor's closet at center stage, even away from the boys. The only people that knew that we were there was a couple of the WCW agent type, whatever the fuck. And we got there way early, and we walked out the side and came in the front door and walked down the stairs and let the people see, oh shit, that is them. And the boys are dressed in street clothes, but I've got a tennis racket and wearing my shit. So they kind of figured it out. And we cut the promo that we don't appreciate what you showed last week, that edited footage that you showed of Riggy Moore and Robert Gibson, the Rock and Roll Express, who have never been able to whip us or any of my teams ever in the history of their lives. And you edit that footage together, making us look like a bunch of flunkies and them beating our butts. I couldn't say ass on TV. But what I did get bleeped for was this was the whole point. I said, we left here because we were being disrespected, unappreciated, and we hated Jim Herd, and we're not fond of current management, and they bleeped out that I hated Jim Herd. They didn't want slander to him or whatever. And then lied to Watts and said, the microphone didn't pick it up. I think it'd hear me out on Peachtree Street. And I cut a fucking promo of what I would have said to the goddamn WCW as a company without the fuckings of what we thought. We're not going to let this go by. No, get that fucking hog-headed Bill Watts out here. Fuck you. You're not showing shit of them beating us up. Well, they're back there. They can come out here and beat you up if you want to right now. Okay, goddamn it. And they all had a match in their fucking street clothes. And the people were go back and watch it. The people were going batshit through the whole thing because it just livened the program up. They didn't expect to see any of that. And that's what they needed, was a little fucking spark.
It was also, I know this is probably not the way anyone really looks at it. It also ended up being on air Bill Watts' finest moment in WCW, because he had started getting booed by the fans because the product wasn't exactly getting a lot better. He was pushing Eric Watts really super hard. Or Dusty was, because he was the booker. One or the other. Yeah. Eric Watts was being pushed really hard.
Well, one knew what the other wanted.
Right. And, Watts hadn't really broken away from just being, the cowboy. It wasn't like they even talked about his history or showed UWF footage. It was just one day he was there, and he was just in charge, like, a cowboy Jack Tunney. But your thing was the first time we really got to see any energy.
Well, yeah, that he had nothing to play off of, as they say in show business. And that was the thing, is if you had not only a believable scenario, but also something that the people didn't expect, involving people that they knew who the fuck they were, it was kind of more energetic than what they'd been doing in WCW for the previous couple of years. And that, that woke people up. And it also gave people, by the time I got finished with it, he got out there, I think they would have voted for fucking Mussolini, to tell me off. But that was part of it. But it gave him something to do that he was good at, which was being the stand-up babyface, settle it in the ring fucking kind of boss, owner, commissioner, whatever the fuck he was. And then we brought Bob Armstrong from Smoky Mountain. And again, if I was a Mark Booker, I would have had Bob come in and go and start cussing at Watts. No, because Bob was a babyface too. And we were the heels, not the fucking company. And so Bob was the one, as the Smoky Mountain commissioner, that we had made an appearance on WCW television, was also able to handle what was going on Smoky Mountain TV. And they worked together to get us into a position where we had to put up or shut up or whatever. And that's another reason, because Bob Armstrong, people in fucking Atlanta, if Watts had booked Atlanta in 74 and used Bob on top, he knew he could cut a fucking promo and they could work together believably again, not in a match. I'm saying work together to give some credence to this thing, that both of the, and also for Smoky Mountain, that both of the commissioners of these various groups, who are kind of being treated equally, are in agreement that this thing needs to take place on pay-per-view, that type of thing. But it was, and to be honest with you, we did a couple of the TBS TVs, but we did I think Gainesville, Georgia WCW syndicated show back when that was a thing. That's where we had the match. It was the Stan Lane, Tom Pritchard, the Bodies, and Steve Austin and Brian Pillman in an 8-man tag against the Rock and Roll Express with Shane Douglas and Ricky Steamboat. And Steamboat and Douglas were their tag team champions, and the people spent the whole match chanting for the Rock and Roll Express. and that didn't go. There was a lot of people in the locker room hot because we came in for like 2 tapings, got a lot of fucking attention, do the pay-per-view match, which they liked in Asheville, and then boom, it were never seen again.
And again, right after that angle, Bill Watts never seen again. Jim Ross never seen in WCW again. He had been the voice of WCW. So it was a real changing. Right there, your brief appearance was kind of the signal of the changing of WCW from, Watts was the end of the previous period. Bischoff was the beginning of the next one.
Well, but and history has shown, because that was February 1993. History has shown for the next, about 2 or 3 years, they did some stinky fucking business.
Did you keep in touch with Watts at all, or much, between that and 95 when he showed up in the WWF?
Again, that was only a couple of years that I was going insane. I didn't think he wanted to hear. See, that's the thing. I don't think Watts has ever really wanted to hear about anybody else's fucking wrestling when he was out of it. I don't think he's never been one to. Unfortunately, he would exchange various business and financial opportunities more than he would exchange on the phone ideas about any kind of wrestling that he wasn't involved in.
Oh, the other day I was going through the Watts file in the Kaiser Wrestling News Archive, and I laughed because, I got one too when I was a teenager, and I got to know Bill Watts at the Dennis Carluzzo thing. It was like, hey, Norman, great to hear from you. here's, the new gummies that I'm selling, and here's the new vitamins that I have. These are the greatest.
I had a box of vitamins and supplements at one point that I think weighed 40 pounds that I gave to Goodwill, that I think if I'd have taken all of them, I'd either be a goddamn physical marvel and a behemoth right now or been dead for 15 years.
Imagine if he had had the internet. CowboyBillWatts.com. Get my vitamins. I'll sign every 40-pound jug of vitamins you buy.
Oh my God. Well, that was the thing. You talk to him. You can't leave the conversation until you are fully sold and investing money in whatever the fuck he's doing. I think I had an air filter or two. But anyway, we loved the cowboy, but he saved our ass on that. And we got paid because Smoky Mountain at that point, we needed to buy something. I can't remember what it was, but something in the range of some kind of equipment that would help keep us on television.
What was the date of Bluegrass Brawl?
April. The 1993 was April 2nd or 3rd.
So did the paper protect you? I mean, did you have any worries about them pulling Arn or Bobby?
No, actually, I was hoping they'd let me keep Bobby. No, of course. I didn't think.
But what did you think they were going to do?
Well, no, that's for a while. I thought they might let me keep him because it was like Watts had been the champion of him coming there to freshen up so that he could bring him back. Whatever they had done to him, it wasn't attractive in the booking. So Watts was going to bring him back somehow with something better. And so I'm thinking, since it was Watts's idea, maybe they're not going to renew him. I might have him, but no, they still, well, I'm not begrudging them, but they still renewed him and brought him back because all the agents and anybody involved in the wrestling booking always voted for him. And with Arn, I had paperwork. So, and it had already been announced and they kind of couldn't get it. They didn't really want us to not come either because they had already announced this thing was going to happen on Super Brawl. And then all of a sudden, if it just vanished, that would have been awkward.
And again, it's always interesting too, that within 6 months you would be on WWF TV, which the only thing
more same goddamn match. Minus Stan, who had to think, what the fuck? Stan retired like May 15th, and we started with the WWF at the end of July.
Well, he started as a commentator right after that, too, so it ended up working out somewhat for him, too. But that would happen, and then Arn and Bobby would continue their feud in ECW. So it was the rare program that went to 3 different territories, if you want to look at it that way, within a couple of years. But yeah, what could have been? I guess that's the big question of Watts stayed. Which it's very hard to see any scenarios where he would have, just based on everything at that time. But if he had, you guys would have been in development, or what? Like Eric Watts would have been sent there, someone rehabbing would have been sent there, someone who needed a new gimmick would have been sent there.
And also let's see, because I'm about to bring Candido in, so Candido would have been directed south instead of. But this is all if Watts had stayed. I mean, and that's just so far-fetched, but let's say he did. A lot of the guys, the heavily bodies, ended up going to the WWF for a run, but a lot of the guys that we found and or fostered would have been directed in that direction. And it's to say Paul Orndorff got Brian Adams, try that again, Brian Clark. Night Stalker was Brian Clark. Brian Adams was Crush, but Brian Clark, the Night Stalker, was the kid that was driving Paul Orndorff to the Smoky Mountain shows. So we were able to give him a place to work so that Night Stalker then went to WCW. But that was just the very tip of the iceberg there. And then all of a sudden we started sending people the other way because we did. But it also, I had thoughts of, to be honest, I was going to get Charleston, Huntington, West Virginia out of Watts before it was over with. Because we couldn't get TV out of there. And we had that market. That was one more fucking market. We could make the money we were making in Knoxville and we'd be fine. We'd be just swell. One more. And They had TV on the Strong station. And Watts said, look, we'll not run live events against you in Knoxville and Johnson City. And the rest of the towns we ran were too small for them at the time to run anyway. And I said, Bill, give me Charleston, West Virginia. One more. I know I could make that fun because they run up there twice a year. I could make that thing a monthly town and boom, and we'll have it. And it's all drivable from Atlanta for everybody. And he was thinking about it. Newman.
Do you think you would have been able to draw better in limited programs with Smoky Mountain talent with WCW wrestlers than they were drawing at that time in the South?
Well, I mean, it depends on, I wasn't thinking that we were going to just suddenly be flooding our cards with all of the guys that they didn't want to use down there. It would be, and see, the Watts understood the economics of a goddamn territory. We've got 12 guys on a spot shows, but we've got 16 or 18 on our monthly towns, except for Knoxville with managers. We got 20, 22, but we can take 2 or 3 and work them in. And he understood. So it wouldn't be like just a goddamn developmental territory. But if somebody had the potential that needed the time that you thought, well, I could do something with him if he was 6 months or a year better, then that's where you start working together. And then with some of their name guys, if you brought in as a challenger to a heel champion that you didn't have a baby face that was fucking ready for right then, just see if he was going to get his ass kicked, or a mystery partner, special partner or something. Yes, I probably could have drawn a bigger house in Knoxville with half the guys they had on the roster in 1993 in WCW that they were, because it would have been made special.
Probably a silly question, but did you ask him at all about Brad Armstrong?
Well, obviously I can't truthfully remember where Brad was at in the injury and or activity equation at the time, but that was the thing that I'd been trying to figure out some way to do since the start of the thing. There had never been a point where Bob, Brad, Scott, Steve, and Brian were all available to be on a show at the same time. So, and I'm trying to think, when did Rhodey start with Jeff in the WWF? That was not long after this thing, because we had just used him a time or two.
I think it would have been 94.
Would have been that late. Okay, we started using Brian in late 92 as the Dark Secret. Yeah. Which was the Arachnoman costume that Brad wore in WCW turned inside out.
That was one of the first matches in Smoky Mountain I saw. Dark Secret versus Dixie Dynamite.
Yes, Brian Armstrong versus Scott Armstrong.
Hey, one other question about all this Super Brawl 3 in Asheville. It was also the return of Ric Flair. He didn't wrestle, but it was his first WCW appearance since 91, since Jim Herd. He had just lost the match to Mr. Perfect on Raw, the 3rd episode of Raw, I believe. Did you get to see Flair that night? You had a lot going on and you didn't leave in a good mood, but did you get to talk to Flair or see him that night?
Well, yes. I mean, I wasn't dominating his time for Old Home Week while he was, doing his big deal. But yes, see, I got to see everybody, and I enjoyed everybody except for, certain people that we've already talked about, like Eric Bischoff and whoever the Office Stooges were at the point. That's where, and who was it? God damn it. Somebody, when I was walking, we were at the Asheville Civic Center, and you've never been in there, but you go right for the small babyface locker room side, left for the small heel locker room side. And I was in the side there, and it was maybe Nick Patrick, the referee. Said, it's good to see you back, but somebody said, it's good to see you back. I said, well, fucking look quick. And he looked at that look on his face. And I said, as Dennis Condrey would say, don't pull up no chairs because we can't stay. And he said, I said, no, Watts is gone. We ain't whatever the fuck, right? And so then, well, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I think you were going to say what I was going to ask you.
Well, that's when Dusty called me in a little while later on. I heard Dusty wants to talk to you. Okay. Because Dusty was now the booker, I believe, again. He may have always been the booker.
Yeah, I think he did book throughout Watts' run.
He was always the booker, but Watts was the vice president because they never let the booker do what he wanted to do. And I went in and Dusty said, "Do we have heat, kid?" I said, "What?" He said, "Do we have heat?" Somebody told me you won't be around long. I said, "No, I'm talking about Watts being gone, Dusty." I said, "I love you. If you were running this place, I would still be here." But apparently even Watts was supposed to be running this place, and he's not anymore. So nobody's running this place. I don't trust any of these motherfuckers. I came back for 6 weeks, and here we are. But I love you is basically the gist of our meeting. And I just wanted to make sure, kid. But it was like, geez, it's just, it's like a fucking Agatha Christie novel. Every time you deal with that company, you turn around all the plans you made or any arrangements or deals, handshakes, whatever, contracts. It's just fucking chaos. You don't know whether somebody that has a half-ass idea of what they're doing or not is going to be in charge of anything. And it would continue to be that way until they blundered into their, 83 weeks of success and then crashed and burned like a fucking meteor in the New Mexico desert.
Hey, one last thing on all this, then we move on. I don't remember it exactly, but it's your story. Maybe you will.
It's your story.
Wasn't there some kind of incident on the way out where you you almost went at it with someone from the production crew?
Oh, yes.
In the parking lot?
Yes. What was the guy's name? He was on the credits in early 90s WCW as like the security guy or whatever. His nickname was Bear or something. But he had come along after I had been gone from the company, so I'd never seen this fucking guy, right? Well, the thing was because of the date that the pay-per-view was in Asheville, me and the Bodies had a match in Johnson City at Freedom Hall at 1 o'clock that afternoon because I couldn't leave the Bodies and the Rock and Roll off Smoky Mountain show. We had a match with the Stud Stable, Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden. And then we got in a car and drove the 60 miles down to Asheville. And when we get there, everybody's already fucking parked. So as we pull in, I see David Crockett. "David, where can I park?" He said, "Just pull up there." Whatever the fuck, we're pointing around. David Crockett has authorized this. So I pull up there, we go in, and we don't think anything more about it. Who was in the car with me? It was me. Actually, I think Tom Pritchard went with somebody else. I think it was me, Jimmy Del Rey. No, Jimmy Del Rey wasn't there then. It was me and Brian Hildebrand and Tom Pritchard. That's who it was. But Brian Hildebrand was in the car with us. So anyway, after the show, well, not after the show, but after our contribution to the show, we're going to try to get out of there because it's been a long day. So I'm waiting on Dr. Tom, and Brian's already gone to the car, and I'm kind of halfway. And Brian comes running up and says, "Hey, they're going to tow your car." I said, "What?" "Hey, this guy says he's going to tow your car." And this is when I had that Ford Taurus that you've seen on Smoky Mountain TV where Bobby Fulton bashed the back window in with a lead pipe while we were driving it. But it had glass in it then, though. And I come out there, and there's this guy walking up the ramp behind us. I said, "Buddy, we're coming." We're just saying, "Well, you need to get the car. I'm going to tow the car." I said, We're coming. We got one more guy. He's bringing his bag, and we'll be right there." "Well, we're going to tow this guy." He was just very vehement. Now, meanwhile, it's Asheville, North Carolina on Sunday night at 10 o'clock. There is barely another goddamn creature moving, not only in the back of the fucking Asheville Civic Center, but as far as I can see or hear, almost anywhere else in fucking town. This is 30 years ago. It wasn't a hip place it is today, right? And I go, what is your goddamn deal? I'm telling you, I have the keys here in my hand and I'm walking to the car to move it. And there's another guy coming and we're going to leave. Well, see that you do. I said, who the fuck are you? He's, well, who the fuck are you, civilian? He said, I said, I'm the motherfucker that's fixing to beat your ass if you don't shut your smart mouth. It had to be a thing where I said, just go back in the building. Leave me the fuck alone, motherfucker. And I'm going to do what you want me to do. And it was one of those things where every time I would say that and try to turn away, at Hildebrand standing there going, oh, motherfucker. This was a last word guy. As soon as I said, I'm doing it now, see that you do. Just to say it. And what if I don't? It's that type of thing. So finally, I started walking back up the hill. I said, motherfucker, I don't know what your fucking problem is or who you are, but David Crockett told me I could park here to begin with. I'm fixed to move it, but if you don't get out of here and say one more word to me, I'm going to kick you in the fucking balls. And you know what? He pulled a knife out on me. And I said, you son of a bitch. I threw my bag down and I think, what did I grab? I don't even know. Was it the racket? I don't even think I had a racket. I think I grabbed a stick off the ground, some kind of a stick of wood. And Hildebrand has grabbed me around in a waist lock, holding me from trying to fucking swing his stick of wood at this fucking guy who's got one of these butterfly knives as he's backing up, talking into his fucking walkie-talkie deal on his, call Doug Dillinger and Asheville PD, call Doug Dillinger and Asheville PD. And I'm screaming, yeah, call Doug Dillinger, motherfucker, and tell him Jim Cornette's about to stick this stick up your ass. I've known Doug Dillinger for 10 fucking years. And he'll believe it. And I swear to God, he's backing up with the knife, but the walkie-talkie, and Brian is wearing on me, even though he only weighed 140 pounds. I'm blowing up, and I've still got the stick. And here comes finally, in about 15, 20 seconds, Doug Dillinger and a bunch of fucking cops around the corner, and Doug's running and looks up and sees me with that stick and this fucking guy and started laughing. I said, God damn it. What the fuck is guy? I said, Doug, this fucking guy pulled a knife on me because I was telling him if he didn't shut up, leave me alone, I was going to kick his ass. And he turned and he said, because that's how I knew it was. He, Bear, go back in the building. And I said, what the fuck is taking over around here? Is everybody out of their minds? I said, this guy was going to fucking pull a knife on me and run me into the goddamn jail because I didn't want to move my fucking car. I said, you don't have to worry about seeing my car around here any fucking more. But then Tom Pritchard comes out like, what the fuck is going on out here?
Wasn't a story too that like Eric Watts was watching all this happen, but he didn't like intervene because he was enjoying it?
Well, yeah, I come to think of it, he was out there, wasn't he? Because well, I mean, what's he gonna do if this guy is this clueless? I've just been on their show. It's not like I'm a goddamn household name, but I've literally just been on their show that they're producing 100 yards to our fucking left. So if he ain't gonna take my word for it, is he gonna let Eric Watts talk him out of this goddamn parking lot Nazism he's going through? The fuck?
Well, we discussed Jim's last days in TNA last time. This was Jim's last days in WCW. Fiery to the last second.
Well, I mean, what the fuck? It's like, Jesus Christ, dude. I mean, I said, what am I blocking here? There's nothing. The show is still going on. There's nothing happening. Nobody's trying to leave nowhere. Nobody's coming in.
I love that he hit you with a civilian.
Yeah. And I'm trying to, because he didn't really have, he obviously wasn't in a police uniform, but he looked like a goddamn dumpy fucking production crew guy to me. I'm like, what the fuck is your issue? I don't belabor this. I'm not in a good mood anyway.
Well, what started as Jim may have something turned into a quite memorable segment. What a great segment that was. And of course, Jim, Maybe Bill Watts.
And by the way, Doug Dillinger, that son of a bitch, just so you know, and I found this too. I'll read this. I can't reach the file now, but I'll read it sometime. Doug Dillinger was the ringleader of the effort that they lodged to fake arrest me that night for assault on a police officer after I'd accidentally kicked one of the cops in Charlotte when they tackled the fucking Mark that had fucking jumped on me from behind. And Doug Dillinger was one of the people that facilitated, because they didn't book me into midnight at the next Charlotte show where they were going to do it. So Doug got the fucking Spartanburg cops involved so that they could serve me with the arrest warrant in Spartanburg at the TV taping that following time we were there, whatever. And I still have the warrant that's signed at the bottom, Big Daddy Jimmy Crockett.
That was the night that you went off on Baby Doll?
I went off on Baby because she knew it was a rib and she started laughing. And I don't even want to embarrass the poor old soul now what I said to her face. But maybe that's why she knocked me out in Raleigh later on that summer, come to think of it. I guess I deserved that fucking punch to the fucking, not temple, but cranium, whatever it is back there. Yeah, her fucking face turned from laughter to sadness in a heartbeat.
That's one of my favorite things about that. They're all doing this on you, and you just immediately turn it by going off on her.
What are you laughing at, you
well, Jim.
Yes.
Just imagine how different history would be if Bill Watts, when selling his vitamins and his supplements and his gummies, or WCW in the early 90s when trying to sell tickets and pay-per-views. What if they had the wonder, the joy, the pleasantry, the friendship of our friends at Shopify?
The cooperation, more importantly than that, because Shopify is a company that cooperates with you. They help you, they assist you, they work together with you, not like the vicious evil empire that we are talking about that was that Turner Empire at the time. No, these are benevolent people at Shopify that are going to take your business to the next level because they're the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world. And their tentacles are spreading. My little pretty. And once they get a hold of your company, you're going to make a ton of money and you're going to be forever figured into the overall flywheel of the scheme of the flywheel of the thing.
There's no scheme, and they won't get a hold of your company. What they'll do is be there to support you, to help you, just like they do with us in our online store, ArcadiaVanguard.com. If you enjoy those new Drive-Thru t-shirts, our friends at Shopify are there, powering our store, getting those shirts to you.
Well, because they're doing the grunt work here. You have the dream, you have the vision, you have the product or service that you want to sell, and they help you with your website. They help you with your descriptions, your headlines, your photography, the marketing, the email, the social media campaigns. They literally take your business and they ball it up and they put it in that old cannon and they shoot it off. Boom, I just hit myself in the side of the face. They shoot it off. And it's boom, and it rockets to the stratosphere. You have been shot out of a cannon. And boy, I tell you what, when you put your ass out, because it's going to be on fire, you're going to find out you've got a bunch more money than you used to because, well, it don't come cheap to be shot out of a cannon. But that's what they're going to do to your business. Right, Brian? There you go. That's what it sounds like when you're shot out of a cannon. Bing! Turn your big business idea into one of those big noises like that. There it is. One of those big noises is what your big business is going to be with Shopify on your side. And right now, they will give you a $1 a month trial period where they can show you the many things that they can do for you. And once they get their hooks in you, don't think that they're going to let you go. No, they're going to want to please you. They're going to want to please you and tease you to make sure that you stick with them. So sign up for $1 a month and get that Shopify monkey on your back. But it's a benevolent monkey that will lift you to the higher limbs so that you can get the better fruit that lies up in the top of that coconut tree. at shopify.com/Cornette. That's shopify.com/Cornette, and you'll get rich, and then you can feed your monkey.
There's no guarantees, but they will be there for you, just like they're there for us. They will help you. Business is their business. Shopify.com/.
Well, all monkeys know that there's no guarantees.
We're speaking about Shopify.
They know that they might get fed and they might not. It's the law of the jungle. But over at Shopify.com/Cornette, it's the law of $1 a month trial period.
That's right. Shopify.com/Cornette.
That's yes.